We're now ready to rank our reps. And the whole point of this will be to think of it like sports. We're ready to name our starting lineup. That's really what this is about. We're trying to assess who are our starters, who are our people coming off the bench, and who are the people who currently are struggling to either make the team or come off the bench at all to get playing time. So that's the sports analogy I want to use for this section. But by the end of this lesson, you will understand the different types. Most of you have probably heard of A, B, and C players. This is common vernacular in the sales world. We'll talk about clarifying what makes an A, B, or C player for our definition purposes. And more importantly, I want to take some time to define the workload that it takes to idealize this rep. And what I mean by idealize is, what does it take to get them to their best selves? How much time do you have to spend with an A, B, or C player to get them better? So we're going to talk about that in depth because that's really the impact that we need. Identifying A, B, and C is easy in my opinion, and it's probably already been identified by you. You probably know right in the back of your head who your A, B, and C players are as we define them. But understanding what it really takes and kind of some of the backwards thinking that actually gets it right this time from upper management about where you should spend your time, we'll talk about it in a little bit more depth. So A players. In a sports comparison, these are your starters. These are your stars, your producers, in and out. These are the people you want on your team every chance you get. That's what a starter is. That's what an A player is. These are the people you're targeting in your recruiting that we'll talk about in a later section. Consistent top performance is what comes from these folks. You can rely on them. You can count on them. Their sales tactical skills are just spot on. At this point in the process, we've assessed their sales skills, we've assessed their strategies, we've assessed their tactical abilities. We've looked at your team in depth to where this should be obvious. But right here, for the A players that we're identifying, these are the people that bring it month in, month out, and don't miss a beat on performance. But another key aspect of these folks is they are at worst optimistic and at best a positive attitude to the team. So optimism, great. They can have their down days, but all in all, they don't have a bad attitude. That will decrease their level of what we would rank them, because their negative attitude revenue will just not be worth it for what you're trying to build of your team. And now let's talk about B players. So sports comparison, these are the people that first come off the bench in games. When your starters need a rest, your B players are the ones that are producing a little less consistently, but they're not leaving you hanging with zeros. They're going to bring 75, 85% of their number every month or quarter, whatever your measurement may be, and they're bringing a consistent production every month. They don't let you down. And that's going to be key for what you're looking for. They are, now I say inconsistent, in only that their inconsistency is they're not over 100% top performing every month. Their inconsistency is going to be a range of 75 to 125 in every given month. That's the consistency I'm talking about. They're inconsistent in that they're not overproducing month in, month out. And when you look at these folks and you're judging them and coaching them on what are their good and bad habits, they're usually lacking just one or two things that keep them from being an A player. That's not uncommon, but we'll talk more when we get to coaching the individual as to why these might be unovercomable even by you. If you can get them to agree that it's worth the time and commitment to do these one or two habits, they can become A players. It's not impossible. I've seen it happen. I've been able to perform this myself. But this comes from within. This has to do with internal ambition more than it has to do with good coaching. So, again, likely an ambition limit that you're facing. Then there's your C players. These are the people that in sports are getting cut or just they have a place on the bench and they never leave. The problem with sales is when you've got somebody on the bench, they're costing you as the sales manager some quota level for your quota. You usually quota for sales managers is a definition of the roll up of your team's quota. And so if these folks aren't producing, you're just left with somebody that's on the bench producing zeros or very low numbers, and you've just got to carry them. You can't just cut them. You can, that's offboarding, and we'll talk about that in a later section, but then you've got to go backfill them with a recruitment replacement. And this gets into where you've got to find talent. If you go get 7 starters, if you're a team of 7, then everybody's an A player or B player and producing. But that's what you've got to look for. That's why talent really matters. And again, we'll get into that in the recruiting section. These are poor performers by every definition that you can come up with for poor performers. Any definition you look at for poor, these are your C players. If you identify any traits, any lack of strategy, any attitude, these are going to be your C level folks. And if there's a negative attitude, we're going to talk about that in an upcoming slide, then it's even more problematic for what you're dealing with. And the question you have to ask is, can they succeed with just coaching? And my argument is they can't. They have to have an internal ambition that's willing to get them off their butts and moving towards bettering themselves every day. Incremental growth takes time, and they've got to be willing to make the commitment that they're going to dig in with their heels and start working to get better every single day at their craft. They're professionals. They need to act like it. They get paid for what they do. So if they're going to be professional salespeople, they need to start being held accountable to that, and they need to be willing to do what it takes to be successful salespeople. So bad attitudes. Let's talk about that. This can determine, you need to determine if the attitude can change. We'll talk about this when we meet with the rep. If there's an attitude problem, it could be from past instances that they just don't believe that the organization or the local culture is going to change. They need to hear it from you that you're the change agent that's going to make things better, that you're going to help remove whatever obstacles are in their way to be successful. But if they're going to be a curmudgeon and just gripe and complain about every single little detail, they got to go. If they can't be coached out of this, they've got to go. And you won't hear me be, I won't be casual about offboarding. Offboarding's a big deal. We've got an entire section on that later on. I don't just take people's jobs for granted and say just fire people. That's not how I do it. But when you're talking with this rep and you spend time and effort trying to coach their attitude up, if it just can't get there and you can't help it change with the coaching, then you've got to make the determination at some point this rep can't stay around, because they're only bringing the team down. The team doesn't need to hear the negatives. So in your internal meetings, begin setting the stage as early as possible that bad attitudes will not be tolerated. I'm all for praise in public and criticize in private. I really am. I want to do that for my team. I want to help coach specific individual things in private. I don't want to call people out in public. But when it comes to a bad attitude, I will hit severely in a meeting with words back on their bad attitude. I will call them out on their bad attitude. I will tell them it won't be tolerated. I will make them feel bad about having a bad attitude. You've got to set the stage early and often. Think about how coaches would handle a bad attitude in their locker room if somebody's mouthing off. I try to think about what Nick Saban would say if somebody's like, we always lose, or something stupid that an Alabama player would say in the locker room that wouldn't be tolerated for an instant. Nick Saban would come down on them so hard and so publicly. You need to be willing to do the same thing. You've got to keep a positive attitude in your team all the time. So in internal meetings where everybody's there, you have to set that stage. Now, if you want to initially say, hey, I'm going to start calling you out if that bad attitude continues, I think that's a smart way to address it. Let them self-correct. But if it continues, you've got to nip that so quickly and so harshly that it's just not allowed in your locker room, if you will. So let's talk about SWOT. So We have been doing the tactical side of SWOT up to this point. We've been out gathering data. We've been looking at reports. We've gathered strength and weakness information, and we've done this skills assessment to get to the strengths and weaknesses of the reps. Now we need to take a backup, because as we get into coaching the individual, there's going to be an opportunity for strategy here. And this has to do with opportunities and threats. So opportunities and threats are the strategic side of, if you've ever seen the graph of SWOT, it's the 4 quadrants where strengths and weaknesses are at the top, opportunities and threats are at the bottom. And when you're looking at opportunities, this is where you are aiming the strengths of the person, the organization, whatever it is. You're taking those strengths and targeting where the opportunities are. It gives you a strategy that if you look at a rep's strengths, you can say, here are the opportunities that you can attack. So if you saw somebody who has great interpersonal skills, or has a calm demeanor, maybe they need to be looking more at enterprise than they currently are. It could be a strategy that you start taking on. And then same with threats, is these are where there's weaknesses that are so glaring that we need to align that and be honest with the rep that maybe there's certain targets they don't need to be, because you're trying to protect their weaknesses. Now you can shore up their weaknesses and get them stronger over time. So if I've got a rep who's a little bit uncouth and a little bit loose and a little bit, maybe not the brightest rep, all these things start piling up on the weakness side. And they want to go sell enterprise opportunities. They want to go sell the big boys. It's probably worth having a conversation that that's currently a threat for them, that they will not be accepted or welcomed into that environment because of their personality, because of how they're a little bit too much to deal with, that these companies like a certain pace and a certain method and a certain robustness that comes through the door. There's more aptitude that helps them walk through more difficult conversations and more complex planning. And it's worth having an honest conversation that, hey, let's not do that yet. Be patient. We can start coaching that direction. We can start working our way up to, instead of jumping from SMB business, small, medium-sized business, we're going to jump into mid-enterprise and work that for a while. Let you work through some of your weaknesses and get stronger if that's really a goal that the rep wants. Don't nix it, but figure out a way to coach them that direction. Or get them to embrace the fact that, look, enterprise is really not for you, and there are so many more companies out there for you to sell to that are not enterprise. It just depends on what's motivating the rep, but this is a good opportunity to just stop and think. You've built the strengths and weaknesses with all the tactical work we've done up to this point. Now it's time to start thinking for the rep meeting, where are the opportunities and where are the threats? And identifying your A, B, and C players will help you in how you want to assess where they should be strong and attacking in their day-to-day prospecting, in their meetings, and the weaknesses that need to be, maybe they're a terrible public speaker and you need to keep them away from presenting openly. If there's a presentation, maybe somebody else can take it for a while they're learning how to be better. Just things to think about as you identify this tactical side. So let's talk about time commitment with A, B, and C players. So most managers that are servant leaders, they want to help the C players. It's a common mistake, quite honestly, to say, I need to spend more time with my C players. No, you don't need to spend more time with your C players. You need to spend more time with your A players. And so I've heard in my past upper management try to convince me that A players are where you need to be, because if you get, I think the logic that was used is if you get 10% more out of your A players with the time you spend versus 10% out of your C players, that's more revenue from your A players. I get it. That makes, from an upper management VP perspective, that makes revenue sense. But if I'm really worried about where I spend time coaching the people who need it, my A players need it more, mostly because of also customer commitments that are there. Not to mention, they are returning the work that I'm putting into them by accepting the coaching and working hard in areas that they want to get better. You'll find that your A players have the ambition level to work harder at their craft and be better professionals. Tom Brady was never afraid in training camp to get under center and start taking snaps. He had taken thousands of snaps, but he didn't go, I've got this, I don't need to worry about getting under center for snaps. He was like, yep, let's go practice. I need to be with my center working on snap take so that I don't make a mistake, even though I've done it thousands of times. He would work on the things that he was already good at. And that's what your A players will typically, you'll find your A players will do this. They will work on the areas that they are strong, and they'll shore up the places where they're weak, and this gives you an opportunity to spend more time there. If you spend too much time with your C players, you'll find that A, they don't return it to you in not necessarily revenue. They won't return it in work effort on changing their habits. That's what I have found. If they do, they move up to B players relatively quickly. This, again, maybe they didn't have good management and coaching in the past, and maybe you can provide that for them. I've had that happen where I've come in behind not as great of sales managers that have kind of ruined a team. And I've been able to show I'm here to coach you, and I've had people embrace it, and I've also had other people that just, they were not going to make the effort. So your B and C players, the way I like to think about it, need to earn your time. And I think if you put that out there, this is a behavioral modification. This is a behavior modification they actually use with kids. Is I like the way this person's doing things, so I'm going to give them attention. And my B and C players, if they want that attention, they need to show these habits, and then I'll give them all the attention that I'm giving my A players. They can earn it anytime. They have to show that they're willing to do the effort and the work to get better, to change their habits. So in conclusion, we can now ID the A, B, and C players. You've probably heard A, B, and C players in your past, and you probably already have a good idea of who these are. But now we can build opportunities and threats off of this. So we can take it another step. We've got strengths and weaknesses identified in all the data we've gathered. We can now start building a strategy around opportunities and threats. What do we need? What does a rep need to attack, and what does a rep need to stay away from because of they are weaker in an area perhaps? I used an example around enterprise. There's many examples that apply when you're looking at certain weaknesses of reps. So your action item is to fill out the worksheet to identify your A, B, and C players. So let's look at that so you know that it's not a big worksheet. This is the worksheet. You need to identify the A players, the B players, C players, and then what's keeping those players, the B and C players, from moving up. That way you've got something to show them. Not necessarily this sheet. I would be cautious on sharing this information on how you rank your reps, because some of them that are not A players will take it personally, and the A players who are happy about it will let everybody know that you've ranked people, and then everybody will want to know what the rankings are. So this is an opportunity for you to fill out and figure out what is it, and then talk about it in the first rep meeting about, hey, I think you could improve significantly as a rep on this team if you were to make these changes. And talk to them about it. See if they'll embrace it. If you've got a head nodder who's just like, yeah, I think I could do that, get them accountable to showing you that they can do it. And let them know that if they don't perform in that area, they're going to get much less of your time.